Welcome to Pastor's Perspective, sponsored by Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa. Brian Perez is my name. I'm the host who loves you most. I stole that from somebody else. But welcome. We're here till 4 p.m. Pacific time, and we'd love to hear from you today at 888-564-6173. 888-564-6173 is the number to call. You can also send us your questions using the messenger feature on Facebook, but it's so much better to hear the sound of your voice because, well, sometimes your autocorrect isn't working as well as I would like it to, or there's no punctuation or something, and it just makes it a lot more difficult for us to really get to what it is that you're trying to ask. So please give us a call if you can at 888-564-6173. And answering your questions today are the Image Church guys, Left Coast, East, or Left Coast, Right Coast, or something like that. It's Bobby Conway from the East Coast, Image Church in Charlotte, North Carolina. And from here in SoCal, it's Mike Chaddick from Image Church in San Juan Capistrano, California. Right?
That is correct.
Oh, good. You were looking at me. I was like, I got that wrong. Oh, no. Yes, it's San Juan. Very good. So what's up, guys?
What's up, Mike?
How you doing, man? How are you?
Yeah, doing good, bro. Good to see you.
Good to see you, too.
Hey, at the Calvary Global Network.
Got a chance to meet your brother.
I was about to ask if you got a chance to meet Mike's brother, Tim.
Yeah. We finally got to meet, man. So it was great to get a chance to meet him and brag on his big brother.
Well, that's always a good opportunity. I appreciate that.
Very cool.
Yep.
All right, give us a call so we can talk to you guys at 888-564-6173. Let's start with a Facebook question. Karen in Australia sent this one in. Is it okay to have people serving at church if they're living in sin, such as a couple who live together but are not married, and he helps out doing sound once a month? Mike, what would you say, Mike?
That's a good question. I mean, for us, I'd say in general, no. And the reason for that is because maybe there's exceptions, but usually if somebody's serving in the church, we consider that an honor and a responsibility. And so if somebody is openly living in sin, that is not representing the leadership in the church the way that we would want. So, you know, I'd say typically no. I do know there's sometimes people are like, well, hey, this person is just coming out of the world and they want to vacuum carpets on Saturdays when nobody's there, you know, and if this person's struggling with sin, should they not be allowed to vacuum the carpet, you know? And I think you could probably say, you know, there's a judgment call to be made there, but I definitely think if somebody is in any position that could be construed or seen by others as being kind of a leadership thing, then to me, it's an easy answer. I would say no, but you know, like I mentioned, and believe me, I'm sure Bobby's got stories too. Just over the years, there's all kinds of different situations and scenarios that actually happen, and you know, I've seen it where, you know, I would still want to address that sin with the person. Let's say they were in a position, it's not leadership, nobody sees them, knows them, it's done, you know, whatever. Like maybe they pick up bottles and take it to the recycle bin on behalf of a ministry, you know, and maybe like the Lord will impress it on the heart of a leader or pastor, like, hey, this guy's struggling. Yes, he's in the sin, but booting him out of doing this little service for the Lord actually is going to, so he's not leading anyone astray, nobody knows, but this guy, if he doesn't have the opportunity to serve the Lord, the devil may really get a hold of him. So I could see in a situation like that where, you know, again, a judgment call could be made. I could see it going either way, but I wouldn't want to just say there's never a situation in which that might not be possible.
It's not some kind of a compromise thing where all of a sudden a lightning bolt is going to strike the church.
Right. Yeah. No, I don't think so. And again, I think when people ask that, they typically mean a position that is visible. Like even if you were, and it's technically not a quote unquote leadership position, but let's say someone's an usher at church. You know, they got the name badge on, the lanyard, and they're greeting people, and then that person's in. You know, might not be a leadership position per se, but you are a visible representative of the church as a whole. And so if that person is living in sin, then yeah, I personally would have a problem with that.
All right. Karen, thank you for sending in your question using the messenger feature on Facebook, and have a great Thursday. I think it's Thursday over there, right? Or is it Tuesday still? I think they're 17 hours ahead. So
Something
all right.
like that.
Thank you so much for writing in. 888-564-6173 is the number. Here is one from Tiny in Maryland. Hello, pastors. I have attached a disturbing article about a church in North Carolina. I don't think it's Bobby's church.
Are you making this up, or is this
No.
Bobby's like, yeah, who's that guy?
It is not Bobby's church. It's not
the
Bobby's
one
church.
down the street.
Yeah, of course. Anyway, this church hosted a drag show in the spirit of being inclusive and showing the love of God. I feel like situations like this muddy the waters and make it difficult for people like me to explain to non-believers that God loves us but doesn't affirm our sin. How would I explain to a family member and friend that is a member of the LGBTQ community the difference between God's love and God's lack of affirmation for a sinful lifestyle when my family member brings an article like this to me? What would you say, Bobby?
We are just inundated right now, aren't we, as it relates to all things LGBTQ plus. I don't know if you guys saw the message going out from Canada where it said a missing woman, and this woman was missing for 9 hours, and they showed the picture, and it was basically a bearded man, a full-grown beard that identified as a woman, and you just think it's absurd. I mean, I literally. I went to bed last night next to my wife, and I had tears flowing down my cheeks, just literally laughing at the absurdity of where we are, and yet at the same token, grieving in my heart. It was this combination of like, this is so absurd, and yet at the same token, going, it's ridiculous. If anybody saw the picture, it would be like, I told my wife, I said, this would be equivalent to sending out a picture of your beautiful mug saying, missing man, let us know if you've seen. I mean, so there's so much going on, and we're seeing it on the news right now. Parents are objecting. They're bringing in, people who are dressed up as drag queens to do story hour with kids. Last week in San Francisco, you had 100 people dressed up as drag queens and half naked through the streets. And because it was drag, it was celebrated. But if it wasn't about LGBTQ, if the three of us went out to the streets and we were just half naked before kids, we would be arrested for pedophilia. But because it's under the guise of LGBTQ, all of a sudden it's made okay. So on one side, I'm starting off by saying we need to recognize the absurdity of where we are as a culture. We need to recognize that we cannot endorse this. We are totally confused. We're inverted as a culture. We're calling good evil, evil good, like we learn in the scriptures. And we are going to have to figure out a way to speak out what God would say on this matter. Yet at the same token, that doesn't mean we can't be loving. We can be in a conversation and just say, look, I've got a conscience, and I've got a conscience that is accountable to God, and I'm trying to be faithful here. And I think it would be unfair for me to have to forfeit my conscience in order to make you feel something approved. Whatever it is you're looking for in your own identity, it has to be deeper than needing my approval. Like, we need to why does the LGBTQ community need a conservative Christian's approval so badly? Like, why can't if their identity is so right, if everything is so good about it, then why is it that they demand us to accept their pronouns, accept their lifestyle, in order to make them feel good about their choices? Like, if it's so right, shouldn't they be able to feel okay even if we can't agree with them? So I think what we need to do is we can say a statement like this: we can accept each other even though we don't agree with one another, but we shouldn't be forcing one another's conscience on each other. And I think we could tell the LGBTQ community, I can love you. I'm not going to go cancel you out. Can you offer me that same respect as somebody who's not trying to reject you, but as someone who's trying to be faithful to God?
Mike Chaddick, what would you add?
No, I think Bobby's addressed quite a few of the issues. And again, it's a literally bizarre time. And I think a time will come, Lord willing, when, people look back and be like, what in the world were they thinking? I really do. Like right now, it seems cutting edge to say,
At least I hope so.
Yeah,
because
I do think
it almost looks like it's getting worse. I mean, we do
well, if you think
hope.
about it, there's just a lot of practical repercussions that have not occurred at a widespread level yet. So what's the effect on children who are changing their gender, taking, hormone blockers and, removing, parts of their body? And then what's that going to look like when they're, their late teens and early adulthood, and then they change their mind. They do want to have kids, and they honestly, in this mass movement of people who did all these things, believed all these things, look at the adults and say, why did you not stand up for us?
Yeah.
It was actually your job to be the adult in the room and say, hey, you can't just make up whatever in the world you want and then go out in the real world and try to do it. Just because you feel like Superman doesn't mean you should tie a blanket around your neck and jump off a building because you saw it in a movie,
Right.
So I honestly, I do think, even apart from what I would hope, which is a spiritual revival, where our nation and our culture repents of its wickedness, its evil, because ultimately these are symptoms. This is not the ultimate cause. Sin is the cause. Godlessness is the cause. And so getting people back to the Bible, getting people back to the gospel of Jesus Christ and being born again, because that's the identity everybody is ultimately longing for. Everybody has guilt. Everybody has shame. Everybody has a fluid identity in the sense that you don't feel stable and solid. That's right, because you are meant for God. And until you come to know God, you're never going to have stable identity. So you're constantly going to be this, that, and the other, whatever it is. Maybe it won't be as radical as, shifting your gender, but I mean, people go from finding identity in a love interest to a job to, whatever it is. And ultimately, the gospel is holding forward the only solution to this identity crisis, which is identity in Christ. And that's the only identity that is robust enough to handle all the different pressures of life. And so I'm praying for that, but I'm also just common grace praying that, people will, I would hope they would not learn the hard way, but if they have to learn it all and the hard way is the only way they're going to learn, then but I hold responsible, not even so much the people who, are the LGBTQ and they're going through all this, but the people who they're not doing that, but they're in positions of power and they're not only enabling, they're pushing it on people. They are the ones that are the highest level of responsibility. And honestly, they need to repent right now, or God needs just judge them now, because someone's got to stand up for all the kids. Because it seems like very few people are standing up for them anymore.
That verse about the millstone comes to mind. Bobby, any other comments from you?
Yeah, I would say that we do got to make sure as pastors that we don't put our head in the sand right now. I think that we have to really be aware of the kind of culture that we're living in and help our flocks to understand. Ours is a culture that is marked by a militant secularism. It's parading itself on LGBTQ+. It's replete with religious pluralism. People are disillusioned because of the scandals in the church. And so there's all kinds of problems on our front end. And then you add in some of the critical race theory and all the other things. There's a lot going on, and it's going to require pastors to think and to equip. And even if it's not on Sunday morning, it needs to be that they're finding ways to help give their flocks a worldview. I was just with 3 girls that are younger in our church on the 4th of July. my family went over to a family's house, and they have 3 daughters, and they were sharing how hard it is for them at this time because their heart is on their sleeves. They were asking me the question, how is it that we keep talking about the LGBTQ thing? Like, if people show up at church, I want them to feel comfortable. And I said, well, I want people to feel comfortable from the standpoint of being welcomed, but I don't want us to feel like we get to a place where we ignore what's happening in our culture. And I said to them, I want to encourage you to be, in the Word of God. I fear that we're making lots of decisions based on our feelings. We're leading with our feelings, and we're not in the Word, and we're blinded. And we have people all over social media, professed Christians, making their arguments about what God would say about this matter, but they don't know their Bibles. So they're just speaking out what they feel. Carl Trueman, I posted a statement by him today on my social media, and I think it's helpful. He said this: a movement that cannot or will not draw boundaries, or that allows the modern cultural fear of exclusion to set its theological agenda, is doomed to lose its doctrinal identity. Once it does, it will drift from whatever moorings it may have had in historic Christianity.
Wow. All right. Tiny, thanks for Messenger. I also noticed something that you posted on your Facebook page a few days ago, Bobby. It was a conversation with somebody you know. And I mean, I don't know if you want to totally get into that right now, but it was just somebody who was trying to come against what you were saying about the LGBTQ community, somebody whose kids are involved in that.
Yeah, exactly. So I could tell people, I said it's sad that we're living in a time where people will parade, their LGBTQ flag above our American flag, where people's blood is what purchased the freedom for people to even have that flag. And so what happened was I had a lady that ended up posting, I used to be her pastor, and it turns out that she has 3 LGBTQ kids. And she shared how she sees kind of the gay rights, she equates it to civil rights. And she has 3 kids that are part of the LGBTQ plus movement. And I had the opportunity to kind of interact with her in this discussion. And I tried to let her know while we were talking, I put, "Hey, old friend, how are you guys?" I suppose my initial question would be, what does it look like to have civil rights for the LGBTQ? I'm trying to understand where you see them as oppressed. I don't question your heart as a mom for your kids or your love for our nation. I know the story of your father. That's something else. I just certainly wouldn't feel comfortable waving an LGBTQ flag. I don't want our LGBTQ friends to be oppressed, but I also don't think disagreeing with someone morally has to be considered oppressive or unloving. It's just disagreeing. I can accept someone without agreeing with them. Say hi to your family, hope you're well. And that was kind of the way that I interacted with it. So I shared where I was at, but hopefully she felt the love that I had for her as a person.
All right. 888-564-6173 is our number. Give us a call. We'd love to talk to you. Let's do one more from Facebook. This one is from Judy in California. I'm reading Romans, and I'm finding it difficult to understand why we are dead to the law. I know the law, being impossible for anyone to fulfill, sets us up for failure, but it also gives us a guideline for what God expects from us. So why dead to the law? What do you say, Mike?
That's a good question. Well, first of all, the term the law is used several different ways in the Bible, and I think a lot of confusion comes around the fact that many people don't realize that. So they think every time the Bible talks about the law, it means the same thing. Not true. So first of all, in the Old Testament, the law is the Torah, and the Torah can not simply refer to rules, but it can refer to all 5 books of Moses, which includes far more than just a bunch of rules. It includes stories, narratives, illustrations, history, etc. So the law, the Torah, can mean that. The law can refer specifically to the Mosaic law, can be simply a synonym specifically for the Mosaic law given at Sinai, which was specifically given to Israel. And then the law can simply mean law in the broadest conceivable sense, the rules, if you like. And so what Paul is talking about in Romans is specifically the Mosaic law, the Torah as the Mosaic law, that we are dead to that law in the sense that God made that covenant with the Israelite people. They broke it. They couldn't keep it. Jesus, the one and only faithful Israelite, the promised one, the seed of the woman, the seed of Abraham, the seed of David, he comes, he fulfills the law, and when he died, that brought the old covenant to a fulfillment. And Christ, when he rose again from the dead, and you'll remember right before he died, he inaugurated the new covenant, right? That's what he was doing at the Last Supper. And the new covenant now is the covenant that God's people are a part of. So we're dead to the law because through Christ, just as is symbolized in baptism, we die, we're buried in the water, we come out, we die to not only to the flesh as an individual, but we die to the old order of things. A lot of people don't realize this, but Paul talks about the language of new creation, right? So the Torah is a part of old creation. It's the fallen world and how God was working through a covenant people to deal with the problem of sin and to bear witness to himself. But in the new covenant, actually you become a new creation. And Paul says this famously in 2 Corinthians, behold, if anyone's in Christ, new creation. So new creation has actually begun, and so we're under the new covenant, and therefore you're dead to the law. So specifically, when Paul was writing Romans, for example, this is where context matters. Probably the Roman church was founded by Jews. They were there at Pentecost, and they were expelled by Claudius. And when they were expelled, the church became, instead of predominantly Jewish, it became predominantly Gentile. But then the Jews were able to come back, and then there was struggle between Jew and Gentile. So the big question, typically throughout the New Testament, is what is the relationship between the law, meaning the Mosaic law, and the New Testament church today? And so that is what he is speaking to specifically. You're dead to that because Christ fulfilled it. We died with him in baptism. Coming out of the water, we are born again with him, new creation, new covenant. So that would be how I would address it.
Judy, thank you for sending in your question on Messenger. 888-564-6173 is our number. We've got Bobby Conway and Mike Chaddick answering your questions today. Let's go to the phones now, beginning with Yvette in California. How can we help you, Yvette?
Hello. I was surprised you got me quickly than I thought I was gonna. I thought I was gonna have more time. So anyways, just with the whole Roe versus Wade, a conversation with my girls came up, and I wasn't sure how to respond, which was what do we say when it's someone that's might have been raped or molested, as far as an abortion goes along.
How old are your girls?
One is 16 and the other one is 30.
Okay. Bobby, what do you tell Yvette? This is something that comes up a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I would obviously think that we would need to just do our best to empathize and validate and comfort and try to provide counseling and to pray with those individuals. I mean, it is agonizing for those that experience this, obviously. Now, of all the abortions that take place, there's various reasons why people get abortions. Mother's health, child's health, feeling like they can't afford it, knowing it's going to transform their life. Then there's incest and rape. As it relates to incest, rape, the mother's health being threatened, or the child's health, those four areas combined relate to only 1% of all abortions that take place. 99% of abortions that happen, of over the 60 million abortions that have happened in America, only 1% or less have had to do with rape, incest, the mother's health, or the children's health. That means 99% of abortions are convenient abortions. It's recognizing it might limit one's lifestyle. So all that to say, that statistic is very low. Now, here's what I would have to say as well, to be consistent. I feel like we need to understand that it's a horrific situation that has happened, but you don't take a wrong and then make another wrong. So you don't go and take a life because your life has been, obviously brutalized. And so the way that I would help us to understand this on a biblical grounds is the same Hebrew word that is used to talk about a baby inside the womb is the same word that is used to refer to a baby outside the womb. The same Greek word that is used to describe a baby inside the womb is the same word used to describe a baby outside the womb, brephos. So that right there is compelling. Then you bring in Psalm 139, and we realize that God has formed us, stitched us together. In Psalm 151, verse 5, David said, "In sin did you conceive me." Now, who was conceived? A person, me, was conceived. So we can trace me, the personhood, back to conception from Psalm 51, verse 5. So I think that what we have to realize then is if we believe that the baby inside the womb is a baby, and I don't think you can get around that biblically. And then with ultrasound technology and all that, I think it just is very compelling. We can't say that just because a baby is shielded by the stomach of a mother, that as long as the baby is under the shield of a mother's stomach, right, inside the uterus, that she has power to take that baby's life. But the moment it comes out of the womb, now she can't do this. So I would say, because it's the same human being on the inside of the womb as it is on the outside of the womb. So why just because of location, changing the location doesn't do anything to change personhood. So I would say not only that, then some would say, well, what about some of the earlier stages of development? Nearly shrinking the size of the baby doesn't make the baby less valuable. So what do we say? Well, once the baby gets to a certain size, it's more valuable. But if we can shrink the baby down to a certain size, now it's less valuable. So those would be some of the ways that I would try to help them to understand. And then we need to help these kids if they want to get their child adopted or whatever. Obviously, we need to be there for that. But we cannot take one wrong and say, let's do another wrong.
Let me check in with Yvette really quick to see what she thinks before I go to Mike.
I think that's great. I actually did use in stating that the percentage is very low for those girls. So I'm glad that I was right about that. I think everything he said was perfect.
Yeah, Mike?
Yeah, no, I'm glad Bobby pointed that out, because I think a lot of people, and again, like Bobby, I think said also, if someone was actually dealing with this scenario, of course, we would want to be very, very sensitive and understanding and walk somebody through everything, in a certain way. But I think usually when this gets brought up, it's not in that context. It's somebody trying to argue that we need to have abortion laws because of rape and incest. But again, they're literally taking something that is less than 1%. It's an exception. And they're wanting to build a rule out of that. So since this apparently happens 1% of the time, we want to make this 100% rule for any particular scenario, including inconvenience or birth control or whatever else it is. And that's not even logical. That doesn't make sense. If this is something that hardly ever happens, why are you raising it as your main argument? It actually kind of highlights your argument is probably pretty weak if you're having to take a scenario which almost never happens and it's your main argument. Right. And I think that highlights it's an evocative argument, right? This is not a logical argument. What they're hoping to do is make you feel, you're obviously in a positive sense, you're moved with compassion. Oh, yeah, this is a terrible situation, which of course it is. But then there's also kind of like a guilt thing. Well, how dare you not toe this line on this broad view of abortion because of this, very narrow case. And that's why the facts, objectivity, facts, logic, critical thinking are so important, even on hotly debated emotional issues like this. And I'm very thankful Bobby addressed that so well.
Yeah, we got to take our break. Bobby, did you just have a short statement to make, or do you just want to come back and finish when we come back?
Yeah, let me come back. I do
Okay.
have a short statement, but I just want to make sure I can develop it real quick.
Okay, no problem. Pastor's Perspective is what you're listening to. Give us a call with your questions. 888-564-6173 is the number. 888-564-6173. Bobby Conway and Mike Chaddick are here to answer your questions today till 4 p.m. Pacific time. So call us at 888-564-6173. We're back on Pastor's Perspective. Thank you very much for listening. If you just happen to stumble upon us, we're here every Monday through Friday from 3 to 4 p.m. Pacific time. We open up the phone lines to talk to you guys and answer questions you might have about the Bible, the Christian faith, just about anything that's on your mind. You don't even have to be a Christian to call in, but we'd love to hear from you at 888-564-6173. Bobby Conway and Mike Chaddick are here to answer your questions. My name is Brian Perez, and we were speaking about abortion, and then the break happened, so we had to take that break. But we're back now, and Bobby, I think you had a statement that you wanted to make.
Yeah. Two things real quick. Some people are objecting that, the church shouldn't even be involved in this, that, the church just needs to be the church. But frankly, that's inconsistent. The church does need to be the church, but that doesn't mean the church doesn't need to vote its values. I would ask the person who says that, are they consistent in all other areas when it comes to such language? Because what I think you'll often find is the same people that don't want the church involved in voting their values as it relates to pro-life, they don't mind you voting your values as it relates to pro-LGBTQ plus or other types of things. And not only that, they can go hand in hand. William Wilberforce was used to help eradicate slavery in England, and he used his political clout to do so while also having strong convictions and beliefs in God. So they don't have to be opposite. Yes, church is the ultimate place where we should be striving to change and transform people. The last thing is, I would say, there are some people out there that they want to say something like this: I'm pro-life personally, but I'm also pro somebody else being pro-choice. And that is about the stupidest argument anybody can make because it's inconsistent. And the way that I would encourage our listeners to challenge people when they say that, to say something like this: you would never be that way in other areas of your life. I'm pro making sure that I'm pro protecting kids, so therefore I'm against pedophilia. But if a pedophile wants to practice pedophilia, I'm whatever he wants to do. I'm pro not stealing, but if somebody else wants to steal without consequences, I'm for that. I'm pro not just walking up to somebody and pushing them off, into a subway that's moving, but if somebody else wants to do that, that's their body and they can use their body whatever way they want. But for some reason, we make this silly argument that would say, I'm pro-life, but I'm pro having another woman's choice. Well, no, you're really not pro-life if you're for another person taking someone's life. It's just a convenient way of saying something to not get in a lot of trouble. And I think that we need to be consistent here on these issues.
I hear the politicians say that all the time. That's one of their talking points.
Well, and when it comes to social issues, it could be the case that the church is having to address things that are new, that it's never done before. Obviously, there's just certain things and technologies that earlier Christians didn't have to deal with. But when it comes to the topic of abortion, actually, the Christian church has always taken a stand on the topic of abortion.
That's right.
So I think a lot of modern people are just unaware of history, not just Christian history, but even history more broadly. A lot of people don't realize, for example, abortion was rampant in the first century. Typically, infanticide was used a lot more as a safer way, but it wasn't due to morals. It wasn't because they felt that, the fetus, it's not human before and after. No, it was just maternal mortality because of the instruments. And by the way, I've seen pictures of the instruments they used to use. It's horrible. It's horrendous. So no wonder they would opt for infanticide many times. But from the very, very beginning, Christians were always anti-abortion. This is an issue that's not new. That's what I want to tell people, that, especially, churchgoers that think the church, as Bobby said, shouldn't be taking a stand on this. I'm like, actually, this is something we've always stood for. So you're the one saying sit down, because the church has always stood up for this. Again, there might be a word of caution for maybe other issues out there where the church has never had to deal with it, but this is not one of them. So really, anyone who claims to be a Christian and takes a pro-abortion stance, you are really doing something radically new, and you're departing from what the church has always done. So the idea that we're doing something new, we're dragging the Bible into the public square in a place where it never belonged, not true from the very beginning. If somebody wants a source, for example, the Didache, which comes from, as early as the first century itself, if not the second or third century, specifically says, thou shalt not procure an abortion nor commit infanticide. It was considered murder. Right. Christians wouldn't do that. Christians were actually known, positively by the way, for rescuing abandoned infants. So when Roman fathers, and there's a famous letter of a Roman general telling his wife, hey, while I'm away, if you give birth to a son, keep it, but if it's a girl, abandon it, throw it in the wilderness, and let wolves eat it. Well, Christian women were known for going out into the wilderness and rescuing infants that were abandoned to be murdered or effectively abortion. And so Christians not only were anti-abortion from the very beginning, they were very pro-life in the truest sense of the term. They were seeking to raise, rescue, and bless life. And I think we should continue to stand in that great heritage.
Yeah, Bobby Conway.
Yeah, those are great words, Mike. I mean, look, we get the absurdity of this. Like, you could have a person driving to the abortion clinic to get an abortion, get struck by a car, and she loses her baby, and that person who hit her could be charged with murder. Yet she, as long as she would have shown up not getting hit, could walk right into the abortion clinic and do it, whatever she felt led to do, because it's her body, so to speak. I think my burden is this: we shouldn't have to be wrestling with Christians on these issues. We should be unified. And as Mike so aptly put, this discussion has been around for a long time. When it comes to the LGBTQ deal, people saying, let's get on the right side of history. Well, for crying out loud, do you realize we are living in complete insanity with the amount of pronouns, the LGBTQIA+. We're just extending the alphabet. We don't even know what we're doing. We're just all over the place right now. And now the problem is you've got many people who are using the name of Jesus to say, yeah, you know what? Critical race theory is the way to go. And LGBTQ plus is the way to go. And pro-choice is the way to go. And man, we've got a bunch on our hands if it's just dealing with the change in culture. But now we've got this mess inside the church. And I think what's happened is you got a lot of people that have had their views formed because they've been in the algorithms of their silo on social media, and they've been fed messages over and over. They've been in churches that have been passive on theologically equipping them, not giving them a worldview. And as a result, we're experiencing the unpaid bills, as Walter Martin used to say, of the church, not in the form of cults, but in the form of false ideologies that we're having to deal with. And we really do need a reformation inside the church in a big kind of way.
Mike?
No, I 100% agree. And again, I think, I could say a lot about this, but just to keep it brief, churches have to continue teaching the Bible. Many churches in America stopped doing that a long time ago. They were embarrassed of the Bible. They were ashamed of the Bible. They picked which parts they wanted to teach from and which parts they wanted to ignore. That's been going on for a very, very long time, and not teaching people Christian doctrine and just catering to consumerism. And the goal is no longer to inform people biblical truth. It's to entertain, consumers of religion. And honestly, many churches have gone along that way. And I think, and again, kind of I love that term, Bobby, the unpaid bills of the previous generations of what they've been doing. And I think it's literally spilling out into the streets right now. And again, this is not a quick fix. This is not an easy answer, but I think each of the churches we're all a part of, whether we're pastors or lay leaders or whatever it might be, we've got to be passing on biblical truth to the next generation. We can't, in our youth groups, children's ministry, you can't just be entertaining kids. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, well, if you teach the Bible and you don't just have a reptile zoo and a carousel at church, people won't come. And it's like, well, you know what? Maybe that's true. But that doesn't mean you should stop doing what's right just because you don't think there's a market for it or whatever. It's like you do what's right because it's right, because it's what God told you to do. And you know what? I think even though it might be true, people were just hungry for an experience or a feeling or to be entertained. But I think we're seeing the backlash. We're seeing the repercussions of just watering down the word or not teaching it at all. And I actually think there's going to be an increased hunger, Lord willing, at some point where people just be pouring back to the church for answers and like, man, just tell me what the Bible says, even if it's hard and it's radical and it's totally against what's popular. I don't care. I want to know the truth, because what I'm seeing out there, it sounded good for a while, and in the end, it was absolutely madness, and it's destroying people's lives when it promised to set them free. And I want something that actually sets us free. And of course, that's the gospel.
Yep. Bobby Conway.
Yeah. Brian, I was going to see if you go over to Samuel, because I see him on line 6. And
I'd love to take this call.
Let's see what he wants to.
Yeah, Samuel, maybe we already answered your question in the course of this conversation, did we?
Well, no, not really. I mean,
okay.
I heard that my argument is stupid, but that's not the answer. So,
you what now?
No, I'm asking about a specific text. As far as I know, this is the only text that I know that deals with abortion in a legal way, specifically in the Old Testament. That's Exodus 21, verse 22. It's talking about an accidental abortion. An abortion happens by accident. And I guess my question is, if abortion is murder, why don't we have the penalty for unintentional murder that was in the Old Testament?
Okay.
You know, the the penalty for that was that the person would go to one of these 6 cities that were designated, and then they would see if he actually did not intend to kill. And if he didn't intend to kill, then he would live in that city. And if he did, then they would give him to the relative of the person who was killed, and then he would be executed. So my question is, again, I'm not saying that abortion is not wrong. It is definitely wrong. My question is it murder? And how is, what I'm saying is, I guess, not caring about the baby living is not the same as murdering the baby.
Okay, Bobby, what would you answer? How would you answer Samuel?
Okay, so the passage obviously is in reference to somebody striking a woman, and if she is struck and the baby dies, then this person could be charged with murder. Why is that not the case today? And I would say that different cultures and different countries have different laws. We're just recently coming out of, Roe v. Wade being overturned. So far from being considered murder in our country, it was considered a woman's right. And the other thing, too, as I would say, I really wish women, that we can say we're so much pro-women. Like, that's great. Like, there's a wonderful things, like women having their freedoms, but we shouldn't think being free means that I have the right to take life. So what is abortion? Well, it's to terminate life. So while our culture might not convict somebody that has an abortion for murder, and they won't, right? Unless in the instance, like I said a little bit ago, where maybe a drunk driver hits a pregnant woman on the way to the hospital, he could be charged with murder in that instance. But if a mother has an abortion, she would not be charged for murder. I guess the question then would be, well, just because our culture doesn't convict that of murder, does that mean it's not murder? And I would say no. Now, I want to be careful here, but I don't want to compromise, because I know that, 1 out of every 4 women have had an abortion, and that means that men and women have been affected by this, and it impacts them. But it doesn't. But the reality is, and let me say this as a person who understands this from experience and knows the pain of this as a 17-year-old. I'm speaking as one who knew what it was like to walk by somebody in this pain, and in this confusion, and knowing deep down before I even knew the Lord that something was wrong. I wanted to write a book once called "I Got Away with Murder." So to answer your question, I do think that's what happens. I think that it's a joint project with doctor. What else could it be? If it's a life, if we're carrying a baby and it's a life, and we walk in and partner with the doctor and let the doctor strike the baby, and the baby's alive inside the womb, what else is it? Now, our culture's not going to convict people for murder, but in the eyes of God, I look at myself as one who is a forgiven murderer. And so and the only way that you could ever convince me otherwise is to say that and let me see, okay, 2nd-degree murder, right? Complicit in it. There's 1st degree, there's 2nd degree, but complicit in it. But the beautiful thing is God is gracious, and he's merciful, and he forgives us, and he loves us, and he can heal people, and he does. I mean, look, without the Christian worldview, there's men and women that are just bogged down with guilt trying to process the pain of this. Many people have been haunted by this. And the Christian worldview has helped people who have experienced abortions to find God's healing grace and love.
Samuel, what did you think of that response?
Well, it's actually not my question. I'm not asking why are we not charging people with murder. I'm saying in that text in Exodus, they are not charging the person who causes accidental abortion as having an unintentional murder. So abortion, according to this text, is not murder in the Old Testament law. That's Exodus 21:22.
But that's for accidental, Mike?
Yeah. Well, Samuel, have you studied Hebrew before?
Yes, I can actually read it. Do you want me to read it?
Well, no, I'm looking at it in Hebrew as well. So you realize you realize, I mean, there is debate on how to translate this. So it could be miscarriage. It could be birth prematurely. It's translated differently. So it's kind of like you're assuming a certain translation that's under debate, and then on the assumption that that's the right translation. And it is a difficult text. I've looked over it myself, argued it in seminary with friends, kind of back and forth. And honestly, I just kind of the way, because I always came out of it that it was giving birth prematurely. And if that's the interpretation and no harm follows, because obviously if the baby's born, it was birthed prematurely, well, that's not necessarily a good thing. But if the baby's okay and no harm follows, then of course the punishment would merely be what the husband imposes. But if harm follows, then it says flesh for flesh, nephesh for nephesh. So that actually sounds like if it did die, that would be the death penalty. And if that's true, then it would be saying that abortion is murder. So, I think a lot hinges on the Hebrew itself. And again, it is a little bit difficult, but this is where I would say appealing to the rest of Scripture as well as our hermeneutic, especially when you have one particular passage. Like you said, there's not a bunch of these passages, right? So it's like this is, as far as the Old Testament is concerned, Exodus 21, 22 through 23 is kind of the main text that people look at. But again, the basic idea of thou shalt not kill, again, that's how the early church interpreted it. So that's I would use that as a part of the broader hermeneutic, but just to say, yeah, I can see what you're saying, and I've heard many people say that, but I've also looked at it, and I know that it can be argued another way. So that would just be kind of a bigger debate beyond the scope of a radio call-in.
Right. Samuel, thanks for your phone call today.
That answers the question. Thank you.
All right. 888-564-6173 is the number. Let's go to Oregon and talk to Allison. Hi there, Allison.
Hi, how are you?
Doing well, thank you.
Good. I'm just calling to admonish. I'm a California school teacher, and recently I heard a conversation on Focus on the Family, which K-Wave aired a little over a week ago with Governor Ron DeSantis.
Okay.
And he had brought up the genderbread man. And I know a lot of people are thinking gingerbread man. No, it's genderbread man.
Okay.
And how it's going to be incorporated into elementary school curriculum with the idea that primary teachers would be teaching children based upon the story of the old-fashioned tale that we all know as the gingerbread man. But I just want to say, at first my feelings were, oh my goodness, not in my backyard. I will quit teaching. And then God just quickened my heart and spoke to me and said, no, we need you to stay in the public school system. You are the light, and you are to teach truth to these kiddos and hold up the standards. And I just want to encourage and admonish other Christian California and all public school teachers to hang in there. We need to not not take the flight route, but we need to fight. We need to do the Holy Spirit fighting by praying for these kids before we go into school. I know we can't teach the Bible explicitly, but we can certainly pray for each one of these kids. We can teach how God gave each, we can teach gender as God-given. So I just want to admonish not to take the fear route, but that we need to stand up as teachers in this public school system when we hear things that the Common Core standards want to push down upon us and threaten that we're going to have to teach this curriculum, that we can have God's grace in our hearts and in our lives, and we can continue to uphold His standards.
All right, Allison, thanks for your comment today. Bobby or Mike, did you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, no, I think I appreciate that, Allison. I think you're right, that, again, as Christians, we're called to be salt and light, wherever we can be. And so I see a parallel, you're talking about the vocation of public school teacher. Living here in California, I've never seen this many people leave California in my entire life than I've seen in the last year or two. There's just this mass exodus of Christian families, especially, who say the politics in California, I can't stand it. They're ruining this. They're doing this and that. And I may actually agree with most, if not all, of what they're saying. But I still think that begs the question, well, does that mean you're called to leave? Again, maybe providentially that is a sign that God's moving you out. But I think Christians really should pray about that, even about leaving California. It's like, if God's calling you to go, definitely I can see good reasons to go. But on the other hand, look, what happens when Christians leave anything? If you leave, if all the Christians left California, what's going to happen to California? If all the Christians leave public school teaching, what's the public school system going to look like? So we've seen this play out time and time again, and I understand it. Evangelicals, we get very uncomfortable in certain environments. And I remember Norm Geisler, Bobby, I think you'll appreciate this. He said this one time. He said, evangelicals prematurely abandoned Harvard Divinity School. And he was talking about how it was getting more liberal. They did have evangelical faculty there, but it was clearly they were being outnumbered and things were going in this very liberal direction. And professors there became very, very uncomfortable teaching the Bible in a divinity school where someone else was denying that God even exists or whatever else it was, which I can understand why they'd be uncomfortable. But wait a minute, pray about it, because what happens when you leave? I understand you're uncomfortable, but if you leave, is this going to get better or worse?
Right.
And the clear answer historically is it got worse. So I think that's a good clarion call to prayer and discerning God's calling on your life. Just because it's uncomfortable and the world's trying to minimize you and silence you and all this doesn't mean God is necessarily calling you out. And I would agree that the public school system, there are so many people in it, so many children in it, that obviously we do need more Christian teachers in those places. And I love what you said, Allison, about honestly, I love that, praying for your students. Who knows, maybe you won't get to say a lot, but again, just being salt and light. And at the very least, even if you're not, preaching the Bible in your math class or something like that, by not pushing this alien agenda on these kids, because they are doing that in math classes, like throwing out random bizarre examples and stuff to try to just indoctrinate kids any old chance they can get. I think that certainly preserves the environment and preserves some light that's left within the system. So again, I would agree, and I can appreciate that.
Bobby Conway.
Yeah, well, Allison, we commend you for staying in there. We noticed that your call's coming from Oregon. I'm not sure if you're one of the ones who transport your way down and then get a little respite away or not. But I'll tell you, this is so good to hear your heart. And we do need that. I think Princeton, Yale, and Harvard were all founded on Christian principles. And I think that we need people who are willing to stick with it. Listen, I'm out here in Charlotte, North Carolina, just left California a year and a half ago, and it doesn't feel much different. I know that Gavin Newsom is calling for Floridians to come to California. But here's what I would say. The church is going to need a worldview, but the church is going to need courage too. And the way that we get courage is we need to be Spirit-filled. And this is why we need personal revival. We need the Holy Spirit to fill us so that we'll have the courage. And we really need to prepare our flocks to be willing to be hated, to be rejected, to be outcasts, because the cost for discipleship right now is going to be more intense than ever before.
Good conversation today on Pastor's Perspective. Remember, we archive all of our programs, so if you want to listen to them again or share them with your friends, check out Facebook, YouTube, or Spotify in a few hours. Thanks for listening. Pastor's Perspective is sponsored by Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa.